"Eat white cake, hide black." The words didn't land soft. They slammed into the room like a hammer striking glass, loud enough to cut through the music, cruel enough to draw blood without leaving a wound. A burst of laughter followed, high, sharp, merciless. Champagne flutes shook in manicured hands. Pearls rattled against polished collars. The chandelier above threw its light like judgment, turning the cruel scene into spectacle. At the center of it all stood a woman in white, a gown simple, unadorned, almost too plain for a gala that dripped with excess. Her skin glistened beneath streaks of cream and sugar, the remains of a cake smashed straight into her face. Frosting slid down her cheek like insult made visible. The one who threw it, hostess, blonde, draped in crimson satin, leaned back, laughing. Finger pointed as if she had just uncovered a joke the whole room was invited to share. Beside her, men in tuxedos doubled over, one clutching his stomach, another nearly spilling his drink. Their laughter wasn't private, it was permission. Permission for every guest in that room to join in cruelty. And they did. Phones lifted, flashes fired. Someone whispered, "Priceless." Another muttered, "She should know her place." A chorus of chuckles rose until it no longer sounded like a party but a pack. And still she did not move. Not a flinch, not a word. Her hands remained at her sides, one brushing softly against the silk of her gown, the other hanging loose, steady as stone. The cake on her face, the cream dripping down her neckline, none of it bent her posture. She stood as if rooted deeper than their ridicule, taller than their disdain. Silence should have followed, but it didn't. The hostess leaned in again, her voice thick with venom and amusement. "Didn't think the invite was for you, did you? These halls weren't built for your kind." Ugh. A man at the edge of the crowd barked a laugh. Maybe she thought free champagne came with the ticket. More laughter, more phones. A ripple of humiliation now magnified by technology, every second documented, every cruelty archived. One server near the back froze, tray trembling in his hands. His eyes darted to the woman in white, then to the mob circling her. He didn't join the laughter. He couldn't. Something in the air felt wrong, and he knew he was watching more than a party prank. He was watching a verdict. And yet, the woman remained still. Her silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. She blinked once, frosting sliding from her lashes like melting armor. Her gaze swept across the room, faces drunk on wealth and whiteness, shoulders draped in silk, necks strangled in diamonds. She cataloged every sneer, every smirk, every phone held aloft. The room thought it owned the story. They thought she was the punchline. They thought this moment belonged to them. But what they didn't know, what none of them could imagine, was that the woman they mocked, the woman they smeared with sugar and scorn, was the black woman CEO whose signature alone held up the very roof above their heads. And before the night was done, their laughter would turn to silence. Their privilege would curdle into panic, and the cake they threw as a weapon would mark the beginning of their downfall. She hadn't come here to be seen. That was never the plan. Hours earlier, before the laughter, before the cake, she had stepped through the grand doors of the ballroom unnoticed. No entourage, no photographers trailing her every move. Just a woman in a gown of quiet white, cut simple, free of sequins and spectacle, a deliberate choice. The gala had been advertised as the pinnacle of high society. Rows of chandeliers lined the ceiling like crowns suspended in air. Tables draped in velvet glowed beneath towers of champagne. Every guest seemed to sparkle diamonds at their throats, silk stitched close to their skin, confidence dripping from every smile. And in the middle of it, she had walked calm, unbothered, carrying nothing but a small clutch and a stillness most mistook for weakness. She had seen this stage before. Not this exact ballroom, not these exact faces, but the performance was always the same. At 22, she had been denied entry to a hotel conference despite having the keynote pass in her hand. At 30, she was accidentally escorted out of a boardroom because security thought she was the assistant. At 40, she overheard an investor call her decorative while signing a $200 million deal she had orchestrated. Different years, different cities, same verdict. You don't belong. That history is why she dressed down tonight. She didn't want the gown that screamed designer, didn't want the diamonds that demanded deference. She wanted to see the room naked, unfiltered, to test if the world had changed, to test if money and power could ever outshine bias. It hadn't. From the first step inside, She felt the glances, the scanning eyes that lingered too long, searching for flaws, a hostess whispering into an earpiece, a cluster of donors looking her up and down, smirking as if to say, "Wrong invitation." She ignored it all, found her place near the edge of the dance floor, glass in hand, her posture quiet but unshaken. She told herself she could endure the whispers. She told herself the night could pass without spectacle. But cruelty has a way of finding a stage, and for them, she was the perfect target, one woman standing alone, the only black face in a sea of pale laughter. So when the cake came, it wasn't a shock. It was the script, a script she had read her whole life. Only this time, she wasn't the extra in their show. She was the producer, the funder, the unseen hand behind the curtain, and soon they would learn whose stage they were standing on. The cake was only the beginning. As frosting dripped from her cheek onto the marble floor, the hostess snapped her fingers at a guard posted near the exit. "She doesn't belong here," she announced, loud enough for the violins to falter mid-song. "Get her out before she stains the carpet." The guard moved broad shoulders, jaw locked, every step heavy with borrowed authority. He didn't ask questions. He didn't check a list. He simply walked toward her like she was an intruder in need of removal. Guests leaned closer, eager for the next humiliation, phones angled higher. A woman in sequins whispered, "I knew it. Crashing a gala? Shameless." A man beside her chuckled, "Security should have stopped her at the door." The black woman CEO remained still. She adjusted nothing. Her silence gnawed at the crowd, turning their mockery sharper. They mistook calm for weakness. They always had. The hostess pressed harder, sensing the attention had crowned her the star. She leaned close, voice dripping with cruelty. "Who invited you? No one here. This isn't your world. You people always sneak in where you don't belong." Those words cut deeper than the cake. Gasps flickered through the ballroom, some shocked, most entertained. The guard reached for her arm. His hand hovered inches away, ready to claim her body like property. She didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes remained forward, scanning the chandelier's glow, as if measuring the room not for exit but for evidence. From the back, a waiter froze mid-step. He wasn't filming, not yet, but his gaze told the story. This wasn't policy. This was profiling. Near him, a guest in a navy gown mouthed a quiet "stop," but no sound left her lips. Silence was safer than truth. The hostess, emboldened, raised her voice. "Throw her out. She doesn't have a name tag, no seat, no sponsor badge. She's nothing here." Nothing. The word landed like a stone dropped in water, rippling, spreading. A group of donors near the stage nodded in agreement. To them, she wasn't a guest. She was a spectacle, an uninvited shadow in their carefully curated glow. The guard's hand brushed her sleeve. Phones tilted, eager for the shot of her being dragged out. The crowd leaned in, a collective breath held for the collapse. But she didn't collapse. Not yet. She breathed once, slow, controlled, as frosting cooled against her skin. Her gaze didn't soften, didn't beg. It hardened. And in that stillness, in that refusal to play the role written for her, the balance of the room shifted, not enough to save her, but enough to hint that the storm had only just begun. The ballroom waited for the explosion. They wanted shouting, wanted flailing, wanted her dragged across the marble floor like a trespasser caught red-handed. They wanted the story messy, loud, and easy to dismiss. But she gave them none of it. When the guard's hand brushed her sleeve, she didn't jerk away. She simply lifted her chin, wiped the last smear of frosting from her eye, and placed her hand back at her side. Her silence cut deeper than any scream. The hostess faltered for half a breath. Laughter stumbled on her lips. "Don't just stand there," she barked, desperate to recapture the crowd. "She's not supposed to be here. Take her out." The guard looked down, puzzled by the absence of resistance. His fingers hovered, then dropped back to his side. No training manual had prepared him for someone who refused to give him force to justify force. Around them, the crowd shifted. A man near the bar muttered, "Why isn't she fighting back?" A woman clutched her pearls tighter, as though dignity could be mistaken for guilt. Cameras kept rolling, but the footage told a different story than the one they expected. Her silence wasn't void. It was presence. The longer she stood unbroken, the more the room exposed itself. Every jeer louder, every insult sharper, every smirk uglier. She had become a mirror, and what stared back was their own cruelty. In her mind, old echoes stirred. 20 years earlier, a hotel lobby in Atlanta, a clerk telling her the suite she'd paid for didn't exist. 10 years earlier, a bank manager demanding proof she couldn't possibly be a millionaire. Different voices, same verdict. Leave. You don't belong. And now, here again. Another chandelier, another stage, another verdict passed without trial. But tonight she would not give them the collapse they craved. The hostess sneered, circling her prey. "Look at her," she hissed to the crowd. "Frozen. Guilty. That's what silence means." But her silence wasn't guilt. It was patience sharpened to steel. The waiter at the back, still holding his tray, lowered it slowly. His phone now hidden in his palm, recording. He didn't know why, but instinct told him this moment mattered. The black woman CEO drew a single breath, slow and deliberate. Not to calm herself, she didn't need calming, but to let the room choke on its own noise. And for the first time since the cake fell, the laughter thinned. The silence she carried began to spread, pressing against the chandeliers, against the velvet walls, until even the cruelest jeers sounded nervous. They thought they were watching a woman broken. But in truth, they were watching the storm before it broke on them. The hostess wasn't finished. Silence unnerved her. It slipped through her grip like water, denying her the satisfaction of chaos. So she turned louder, sharper, desperate to reclaim the stage. "She doesn't belong here!" Her voice cracked like a whip, slicing across the ballroom. "This gala is for donors, for leaders, for people who matter. And she jabbed a manicured finger toward the black woman CEO, frosting still staining her cheek. "She's none of that." The crowd stirred, restless with her certainty. A ripple of whispers spread like fire. "Who is she? How did she get in?" Some guests laughed, others frowned, but no one stepped forward. The guard cleared his throat, waiting for instruction. He wanted to act, but hesitation knotted his shoulders. Throwing someone out was simple when they screamed, when they fought. But dragging a woman who stood calm, who didn't flinch, that felt different. His hand hovered again, caught between orders and conscience. The hostess saw the hesitation and pressed harder. "Do your job," she snapped. "Remove her. She's a fraud. Probably slipped in through the service door. Do you think she paid for a ticket? Do you think she belongs anywhere near us?" That word again, belongs, heavy, ugly. The chandelier lights seemed to flicker under it, as though even the room recoiled. From the side, a donor in a navy tuxedo chuckled, swirling his glass. "She's dressed too plain, definitely not a guest, not in that gown," another added, probably hoping for a free meal. Their voices weren't jokes. They were judgments dressed as entertainment. The black woman CEO didn't answer. She stood with the same stillness that had carried her through every trial. But inside, the air was tightening. She could feel the circle closing, cruelty stacking against her like cards on a rigged table. A woman in emerald silk leaned to her companion. "Security should have stopped her earlier." The companion nodded. "The longer this drags out, the worse it looks." And still phones kept rising. Screens glowed like watchful eyes. A dozen angles, a dozen witnesses, all capturing the same moment. A black woman humiliated in a hall she had paid to keep alive. The hostess leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her tone dripping with venom. "You're embarrassing yourself. Standing there like a statue won't save you. They'll drag you out anyway. And when they do, the only thing people will remember is the cake." She smirked, savoring the cruelty. "Because women like you don't walk into rooms like this. You're walked out." The room hummed with approval. It wasn't unanimous, some faces looked uneasy, but the momentum leaned her way. Authority was loud, and the loudest voice was hers. The guard stepped closer, jaw tightening. "Ma'am, please," he began, but even he didn't know how to finish. "Please leave. Please don't make this harder. None of it fit." The black woman CEO's silence pressed heavier. It made the hostess frantic. She wanted tears, wanted a scream, wanted something to prove her right. But all she got was a calm gaze and frosting drying slowly under chandelier light. That gaze unnerved her, so she turned back to the crowd. "Do you see? No words, no defense, because she knows she's nothing. This is a gala for us." She paused, then added the final knife. "Not for her kind." The words dropped like stone into water. Gasps echoed this time, not just whispers, not just laughter. Some phones shook in their holders. A waiter flinched so visibly he nearly dropped his tray. The escalation was complete. The insult wasn't subtle anymore. It was naked. Venom unmasked. And in that moment, the storm began to shift, not because she had spoken, but because the room had. Their own cruelty had climbed too high, too loud, too undeniable. And though she still hadn't moved, still hadn't said a word, the balance had started to tilt. They thought they were crushing her. In truth, they were building her stage. The words, "not for her kind," were still echoing when the guard finally made his move. He stepped in, broad frame blocking the chandelier's glow, and seized her arm. His grip was firm, practiced, the kind meant to silence protest before it began. Cameras zoomed closer. Gasps cracked across the ballroom. The sight they'd been waiting for, a black woman dragged across polished marble, was finally here. The hostess clapped her hands once, sharp and triumphant. "There," she said. "Order restored." Her laughter rang high, brittle with victory. But the room wasn't laughing with her anymore. Not fully. Whispers tangled with the chuckles, uncertainty threading through the spectacle. Too many phones were up now. Too many angles catching not a trespasser, but a paying guest treated like contraband. Still, the humiliation pressed forward. The guard pulled, trying to steer her toward the exit. Frosting smeared across her gown as she steadied herself. She didn't resist, not violently, but her heels scraped softly against the floor, the sound impossibly loud in the silence between jeers. The hostess leaned close, words sharpened for the kill. "Smile for the cameras. This is how people like you leave. Dragged, shamed, forgotten." A man in a tuxedo near the bar muttered, "Good riddance." Another lifted his phone higher, whispering, "This'll go viral." Their cruelty wasn't ashamed, it was eager, hungry, but not everyone stayed silent. The waiter, phone hidden in his palm, whispered under his breath as he recorded, "This isn't right." His hands trembled, tray abandoned behind him. Across the room, a young woman in emerald silk bit her lip, lowering her champagne flute. She looked around, as if searching for someone else to break the silence with her. The guard tugged again. The CEO's body swayed, but her face didn't change. Calm, composed, eyes fixed forward, not on the exit, but on the chandelier above, as if daring the light itself to witness. "Ma'am," the guard barked, "you're leaving now." Her lips parted for the first time since the cake. The crowd leaned closer, desperate for the sound. But all she said was one word, low, almost too soft to catch. "Wait." The guard hesitated, grip tightening. The hostess barked over her, "Don't listen to her. She's nothing. Take her out before she ruins the night." But the word lingered. Wait. It hung heavier than shouting ever could. And then the worst cut came. The hostess, drunk on her own cruelty, spat the line she could never take back. "Women like you don't get seats at this table. You serve it. That's all you're good for." The air snapped. A sharp inhale from dozens of throats filled the ballroom. Phones captured every syllable. No misunderstanding, no wiggle room, no excuse. It was naked, public, irreversible. The guard froze mid-step. He wasn't a saint, he had followed orders without question, but even he felt the weight of that sentence. His eyes flicked to the phones, to the faces in the crowd. Too many witnesses now. Too much at stake. The black woman CEO didn't react with outrage. She didn't pull free. She simply stood straighter, the guard's hand still clamped on her arm, her posture suddenly towering over them all. The hostess laughed again, but it cracked this time. Brittle, unsure. "Why are you all staring? This is what happens when you don't belong. She'll be out in minutes." But the crowd wasn't laughing anymore. A murmur spread like thunder behind mountains, rolling, inevitable. "This isn't right." Did she really just say that? Keep recording. The humiliation was complete. They had torn her ticket. They had smeared her with cake. They had laid hands on her. They had spoken the ugliest words in the clearest voice. And in doing so, they had gone too far. Because now, the story wasn't hers alone. It belonged to every phone raised, every whisper spreading, every conscience stirring awake. And soon, it would belong to the world. The guard's hand still clamped her arm. The hostess still basked in her brittle laughter. But the black woman CEO moved at last slow, precise, deliberate. She reached into her clutch, not frantic, not trembling, calm. Her fingers brushed aside the frosting stain on the leather and closed around a phone sleek and black as obsidian. The room leaned closer. Phones recording tilted for a better view. Some expected her to call the police, to plead for rescue. Others smirked, whispering, "She's calling a lawyer." pathetic. But her voice, when it came, was not a plea. It was command. Activate protocol. The words sliced the air sharper than any insult. The guard froze. The hostess blinked. A beat of confusion rippled through the crowd. On the other end of the line, a voice answered instantly steady, clipped, efficient, confirmed. $4.2 be locked. Audit systems online. Standing by. Gasps punctured the ballroom. Not everyone understood, but they felt the weight. A number that large didn't belong to a gatecrasher. It belonged to someone with power. The hostess scoffed. Too loud. Too desperate. Don't listen to her. It's fake. Some stunt. But her voice wavered. The CEO lifted her chin, her face still streaked with sugar, her gown stained with frosting, but her eyes burned steady. She didn't look at the hostess. She didn't look at the guard. She looked at the crowd, the same crowd that had jeered, laughed, raised their glasses. This room thinks I'm powerless, she said, her tone calm but resonant. But every chandelier above you, every glass in your hand, every dollar funding this night, she paused, letting silence stretch, is mine. Ugh. The guard's grip loosened without meaning to. A ripple of disbelief spread through the donors. Some frowned, some gasped. The waiter in the back nearly dropped his phone, his recording catching every syllable. The hostess tried to laugh, but it cracked, fragile. You're lying. You don't control anything here. The CEO turned her phone slightly, the screen glowing. Transfer authorization confirmed, her assistant's voice repeated through the speaker. All systems under your command. Oh, the silence that followed was different now. No longer the hush of cruelty waiting for collapse. It was the silence before reversal, before judgment swung back the other way. The counterstrike had begun. The ballroom froze. Her words lingered like thunder trapped beneath the chandeliers. The hostess tried to gather herself. She's bluffing, she spat, but her eyes darted to the glowing phone in the CEO's hand. Anyone can fake a call. The CEO didn't argue. She didn't need to. She simply slid a finger across the screen, magnifying the display for all to see. The Horizon Trust account, balance flashing in the billions, transaction authority stamped with her full name. Gasps cracked the air like glass. The donors near the front craned their necks, squinting at the name glowing bright. Evelyn Carter. Recognition rippled through the room. Some had seen the name in Fortune magazine, others on Forbes' billionaire list. Others whispered it in boardrooms as the woman who had quietly pulled strings in industries from tech to real estate. The hostess's face drained pale. No, she whispered, stumbling back a step. That can't be. The CEO turned to her fully now. Frosting still streaked across her cheek, gown still stained, but posture regal as steel. Her voice was low, precise, and devastating. You denied me in a hall I own. The guard's hand fell away from her arm as though burned. He stumbled back, realizing too late whose sleeve he had gripped. A man in the crowd whispered, "She funds this?" Another answered, "Not just funds, she runs it." Murmurs spread like wildfire. Every guest, every phone, every camera now trained on her, not as victim, but as power revealed. The waiter in the back nearly gasped aloud, his recording steady but his heart racing. This wasn't just a scene anymore. It was history in motion. The hostess's bravado cracked. You can't, this isn't. Her words broke under their own weight. The CEO took a single step forward, the marble echoing under her heel. This night exists because I allow it. The lights above you, my dollars. The stage you stand on, my signature. Every toast, every smile, every lie you told under this ceiling funded by me. The chandelier light shifted, as though bowing to the truth. No one laughed now. No one dared. For the first time that evening, the black woman CEO wasn't alone in the room. She had the weight of her name, her fortune, her truth pressing against every wall, and it was heavier than all their scorn combined. The reveal was complete, and the panic was only beginning. The room buckled under the truth. The guard, once stone-faced, now stared at his hands as if they'd betrayed him. His grip, his obedience, his silence, all of it felt like chains snapping in public. He took a step back, sweat glistening at his temple. The hostess staggered, her satin gown suddenly too heavy for her frame. I didn't know, she stammered, eyes wide, searching for an escape, but there was none. The crowd's phones caught everything, her laughter, her insults, her cruelty laid bare. The donors near the stage paled, whispering frantic calculations. What would happen to their contracts, their investments, their reputations, now that the woman they mocked was the very foundation of their gala? A murmur swept through the ballroom. Some guests shifted guiltily, lowering their glasses. Others clapped nervously, desperate to align with power now revealed. The waiter in the back, once invisible, stood taller, recording still, his breath sharp with vindication. And the black woman CEO stood at the center, still stained with cake, still silent. She didn't need to speak. The collapse was happening without her. The mighty had mocked her, and now they mocked themselves. The ballroom held its breath. The black woman CEO lifted her phone once more, not to prove, not to plead this time, to execute. Her voice, steady and cold, slid through the silence. Pull the funding. Effective immediately. On the other end, her assistant's voice came crisp, surgical. Confirmed. $4.2 be withdrawn. Event accounts frozen. Vendor payments terminated. The words struck harder than any security guard's grip. Lights above flickered as systems recalibrated. The music that had been idling under the chaos stuttered, then died completely. Even the air felt stripped bare, as though the very oxygen of the gala had been cut off. Gasps tumbled across the crowd. Donors clutched their phones, refreshing accounts, watching in disbelief as notifications rolled in, pledges canceled, deposits reversed, credit lines severed. The hostess stumbled forward. "You can't just—" Her protest strangled as her earpiece chimed. A soft buzz, a red light flashing, her access revoked. She slapped the device off, but the truth clung to her face. The guard's radio beeped too, his security clearance rescinded. The look on his face was pure disorientation, authority gone in a heartbeat. He stepped back as though the floor itself had shifted under his boots. The CEO lowered her phone, gaze sweeping the room. "For every insult, for every laugh, for every hand laid on me, you pay tonight. Not with words, with what you worship most." She let the pause hang. Money. A ripple of panic surged. Some guests surged toward the exits, whispering of ruined portfolios, of careers ended in minutes. Others stood frozen, shame burning red across their skin. The waiter in the back didn't move. His phone kept recording, his eyes locked on her. To him, this wasn't collapse. It was justice manifest. The hostess tried once more, voice trembling. "Please, this was a mistake." The CEO turned her head, the frosting still marking her skin like war paint. Her voice didn't rise, but it cut clean. "Mistakes are accidents. What you did was a choice." The chandeliers above seemed to bow lower, their brilliance dimming under her command. And with that, the sentence was sealed. The gala was over, not with applause, not with music, but with the quiet, crushing weight of a billion-dollar verdict delivered in real time. The music was gone. The laughter had drowned in its own echo. The ballroom, once dripping with light and confidence, now stood hollow velvet curtains hanging heavy, chandeliers flickering like dying stars. At the center of it all, she stood exactly where they had tried to erase her. Frosting still marked her face, her gown stained beyond repair. Yet somehow, she looked untouchable, as though the humiliation had been melted down into armor. The hostess trembled, satin wilting around her. "Please," she whispered, voice stripped of venom. "We didn't mean—" The CEO's gaze sliced through her, sharp as glass. "You meant every word. You meant every laugh. You meant every hand that touched me as if I were trespassing in a hall I paid for." She let the silence burn a second longer, until the crowd's shame grew unbearable. Then she spoke the line that would follow them beyond the walls, into headlines and history. "You denied me in a hall I own. Tonight it's not my dignity that's gone, it's your future." Phones caught it. Guests froze under it. The chandelier lights seemed to dim in agreement. The waiter in the back, camera still rolling, whispered under his breath, "That's the truth." His recording would carry her words into millions of homes before dawn. The guard dropped his gaze. The donors clutched their useless invitations. The hostess, pale and hollow, staggered back as though the ground itself rejected her. And the black woman CEO turned, not hurried, not flustered, calm, regal. She walked toward the exit, frosting still clinging like a crown of defiance. With every step, the silence followed her, heavier than applause, deeper than fear. At the doors, she paused just long enough for one final glance over her shoulder. The chandeliers flickered one last time, then dimmed into black. The gala was finished. Justice had not shouted. Justice had not begged. Justice had stood still, revealed itself, and left them ruined in their own reflection. And as the footage spread, as headlines lit up across the night, the world would remember not the cake, not the laughter, not the insults, but the quiet power of a black woman CEO who turned humiliation into history.